Welcome to the Larry Kreider's Leadership Podcast. Larry is the author of over 40 books, the founder of Dove International, a worldwide family of churches and ministries in 6 continents, and has over 50 years of leadership experience. He and his guests will share inspirational leadership insights from their journey with God. These insights, gleaned from serving leaders in many nations, will transform your life and leadership. For more information on Larry's books and resources, visit LarryKreider.com.
Welcome to the Larry Kreider Leadership Podcast. So glad you joined us today. Today, I have the privilege of having Kim Zimmerman with me. Kim, thank you for joining me.
Oh, it's such an honor and privilege to be with you,
Yes,
Larry. It really is.
Will be fun.
It will be fun.
I mean, you and your husband, Brian, are known for many things right here in our county.
Yeah.
Often I'm interviewing people from different parts of the nation or the world. But today, we're right here in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania. And obviously, you've been known for the City Gate Houses of Prayer scattered throughout our county. We want to talk about that in a few minutes. Yeah. But first of all, again, this is a leadership podcast, trying to glean from the things you've learned over the years, things you say, I wish you wouldn't have done that, we could have done this, you know what I mean?
Absolutely.
Or they say, this really works. So we're just going to talk about your leadership journey that you've had and then you and Brian have had together. So let's talk about, you grew up here in this county, New Holland area, where at?
So I grew up in East Earl. Which would be sandwiched between like New Holland and Terry Hill.
All right.
And you grew up Garden Spot School District.
Okay.
Shady Maple.
And talk to me about your early days and how you came to the Lord a bit, and then anything about leadership you learned back in those days.
Yeah, you know, as I when you sent this to me, I was really going back, and sometimes you feel like you really don't have anything to share, but then when you start seeing the line that God has from early on, it just is amazing, and I'm amazed by what God has done. But so I grew up in Pennsylvania, but when I was born, my parents moved to Ohio. So I was in Ohio till I was about 10 years old.
Really?
Yeah, and so that's where I met the Lord at a very, very, very young age.
In Ohio.
That's
cool.
I always say how I joke that I came out of the womb a Pentecostal. Like I was born into the Pentecostal movement. My mom was part of that.
Was she like a Pentecostal teacher?
Yeah, she was. And like I was part of the churches that like people were running down the aisle, hands waving, people rolling. Yeah. But it was an Assembly of God church. Church or a Church of God. I forget which one, but because I was at both of those in Ohio.
That's back in those days, those kind of churches scared me, you know that.
Right. Well, and to me it was normal. I remember moving here when Brian and I started dating. He's like, our church is a little different, and it was like a non-denominational. And so I went to the first service, and I'm like, what's different? Like this is boring. Like to me it was nothing. But so it was at a revival service that the church had, and it's so vivid. I was probably 4 or 5. And there was they had this special speaker in, and she was only maybe 2 feet tall, and in a wheelchair.
Really?
But she had the voice of like Aretha Franklin. Like she just belted out these gospels, and I remember sitting there thinking, I don't know what happened, but I just fell in love with the emotion and what she was singing about and crying, and I remember my mom took me up to introduce me to her because like I didn't realize it at the time, but back then I would sit at a piano and just sing and sing and sing, and realized I was probably singing in tongues and just didn't know it, but I would make up songs. So my mom took me up to her to have her pray for me, and I remember this, like looking back now, this sweet little woman was prophesying into me that I would be walking with God. I do have a call and destiny. And so from that, like I went home and I remember kneeling with my mom at like 5 years old that I don't want to not be with Jesus. Like I want that. And so from a very, very young age, I had that encounter with God. But then you kind of become a teenager. Right.
You can stray from that original
you do
connection.
Stray from that. And so I had a very good foundation. My mom was an extreme intercessor, Spirit-filled Bible teacher. So I had a good foundation. But that, you know, they say, you know, just because you stay in the garage doesn't make you a car.
That's right.
So just because I grew up in a Christian home and had made a decision at a young age, I still wasn't really following God.
You can swim in the ocean, don't make your fish.
That's right. But I always had that. It just was always in me. Because I remember even when I would do the wrong things, I felt conviction immediately, always. And
so you've had this call of God in your life, and God's, you know, at a very young age, 4 to 5. Now, think back to one of the first times you remember anything that had to do with leadership? I think I might be called to lead something, or you talk to us about that.
And I think what I hid it for a long, long time because being a woman in Lancaster County, but I was raised differently because my parents were not from Lancaster County.
Right.
So for me, what happened is I was labeled bold. She's really bold. And so I was like, I don't want to be that. I don't want to be that person. So I hid some of these gifts for a very long time.
Sure.
But I used to, at a very young age, like elementary school, I would line up all my dolls and teddy bears and I would teach them and have classes. I would organize them. And I remember even in any sports that I did, like I wanted to be the captain. I wanted to lead the team. In high school, I wanted to be one of the officers of I led things. I always was organizing and in charge of things. It just was like this natural, if somebody wasn't doing it, I immediately stepped in and became the leader of it. But, since I wasn't walking fully with the Lord, it was very brash and it wasn't spirit-led.
Right.
It was very flesh-oriented because I wanted it. And realize sometimes what manifested then is a lot of it was being done because I wanted to please man.
Sure.
And I was looking for attention. And so these gifts I had were not being used to the fullest because I was using them to try to get attention.
So what do you tell a younger person who says, I've got this leadership gift in my life, I see it, I know I'm called to be a leader, and I feel like there's no room for me, and people might misunderstand me.
Yeah.
I mean, what do you tell them? And whether they're a teenager, they're 20s, 30s, whatever age, what do you tell them? What have you learned, maybe the hard way, that could help them in their journey?
I think in all of it, and like I went back and reread some of my leadership books that a dear friend of ours took me through right away. And, it all comes down to your relationship with Jesus first. Mm-hmm. If you're not disciplined in your life with God, you are not going to be a good leader, even if you have leadership qualities. True. It's always going to be from a flesh perspective. So what I tell them, and actually when I was the worship director, I was asked that very same question, who would you make the next leader? And I was looking out at this crowd and saying, nobody. Mm-hmm. Because nobody wants to serve. Mm-hmm. Everybody wants the stage.
Okay, so there's a key.
Servant heart. When I look back, I want, again, it was in me. I wanted to be the worship leader. I wanted to be up there. And God took me through this process. No, learn how to, back then, alphabetize the overheads. Mm-hmm. And then learn how to use the overhead machine. Mm-hmm. Then learn how to, so there was this servant. And
you're giving your age away when you talk about overhead.
I know, right? I'm so old.
You're really not.
So the key for me is you have to learn how to serve first. So my first thing, when I see someone that wants to be a strong leader, I actually look and think, where are they serving now? It's one of the things we do at City Gate when someone comes and says, I want to have a City Gate location. Right. I'm like, are you serving now in one of the locations?
Okay, so first thing you're saying, Jesus was a servant, we're called to serve. And I do that all the time. I'm looking for leaders who are serving, because I know they'll be the best future leaders.
Absolutely.
Now, we keep talking about City Gate. Let's talk about City Gate.
Yes,
talk about how City Gate started. You and Brian had that vision for that. And what it looks like today. And then we're going to talk about leadership lessons you've learned in that whole process.
Sure. Well, and again, this has always been in me to start things, to lead things. Right. And God has gifted me with having a vision, but then also with strategy. And so sometimes I drive myself crazy because I know how to do it, and I know. And so with City Gate, what happened was I was involved in the 24/7 prayer movement. Okay. I was trained. I was working with Jimmy Nyman at Gateway. I was doing a set back there, and doing worship, and the whole International House of Prayer came about. And God just really struck me with prayer movement. But what does that look like outside of church? Could it be a place that didn't look pretty? Could it be a place outside that anybody could come to? Or does it have to be stuck in a box? And so I just started dreaming and praying, and God kept downloading vision of what it would look like and lining me up with people like Jimmy and Keith Yoder that I would share, I feel like this is what's going to happen. And
again, for our friends all over the world, these are key leaders here in our county,
Lebanon County.
Exactly, who have done prayer. I mean, Gateway House of Prayer is amazing, 24/7 House of Prayer. But you're saying there's something different out of the box. What kinds of things were you thinking about? What did you want to see?
And so I wanted to see that somebody who maybe didn't go to church.
Okay.
that wanted prayer or wanted to sit and just listen to music or had a question could maybe just come in and sit down.
A space for people that get closer to God.
Get closer, yes.
That's really good.
Yeah.
And people who could pray with them and pray for them.
Absolutely. And so we kind of, we learned a lot along the way because we were involved in a local church at that point. And, when you're involved in a local church, you think everything has to happen in that local church, in those four walls. And we tried, and it wasn't round peg in a square hole or whatever.
Connect. Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. So then talk about the steps you take. Like the first City Gate House of Prayer was Lancaster, Pennsylvania. Is that right?
Lancaster, Pennsylvania, and we have been working with some key leaders and with our pastor and some key leaders, and we really felt like God told us what to do, and it was kind of like, build it and they will come. Like, this is going to be different. And along the way, we had met with a lot of people and a lot of prophecies that come into our life about this is going to be a different thing. And because some of our leadership story is kind of funny because we did everything you're not supposed to do. Like, we didn't have a business plan. We didn't have finances. We didn't have a board. We didn't have any of that stuff. We had a heart and a vision, and we met with some key leaders that were like, we see this. We're behind you. Let's do this. And so we started the first one with us and just a small team that believed the same thing.
But talk about the team. How important was the team for this?
The team was vital because, you might have a vision, but if you don't have community with you, then you're just, you're isolation. You're doing everything on your own. And so it was very vital as we felt to share to certain, like we didn't share it with everybody. We shared it with people we thought would understand it and support it. And then there were some that didn't, and that's fine too. But we started City Gate Lancaster in 2000. Like, the vision in me was probably started in 2004 or 5.
Right.
But 2007 is when we had the green light from God and the finances to start renting a building.
Okay, so let's talk about it. What did it look like? What did the first City Gate look like?
Were you over there? I don't remember if you were over there.
I'm not sure. Tell me
So
more.
sad. So the first, this kind of dates it too. So it used to be called the Brunswick Hotel. And on the base of it, like in front of Ben's Park, and there used to be like a little small skate park and a small stage. And underneath that, they used to have shops.
Okay.
Well, they hadn't been used for long time. And so the manager of the Brunswick said, well, I'll let you use this space for this much money. But, there was no ceiling. There was no running water. There was no floor. It was just concrete. There were roaches. It was, and we had to crawl, like, to get to our space sometimes. We had to go through, at that time at the hotel, you had to go under the escalator and like kind of crawl through this maze of back underneath the hotel to get to our space.
So basically, you took what God gave you. It wasn't the perfect thing at all. In fact, it was far from that. You just took a step of faith, and you did it, and then...
And we started seeing... So originally, the vision was to be like a branch of what was happening at some of the other houses of prayer, like worship and prayer. And we were doing that. But where we were planted and what we were feeling was starting to develop in a different aspect. So we would have homeless people come in.
Right.
We would have police officers come in. We would have people wandering the streets come in. And so how do you do that when you're trained in like a different model and you want to meet these people and be with them? And so God started really orchestrating and changing our vision for what City Gate Lancaster was to look like.
Okay.
And it became, one of the things we've learned in that is that we might have a vision, but it's very fluid. Mm-hmm. As long as we are loving God and loving people, how we do that changes sometimes. So when we first started, it was very much about prayer and worship. Well, then we started really serving the community because we started doing a free lunch.
Yes.
And so our vision was very fluid. We never swayed away from who we were as a people, but how we did what we did sometimes changed.
Okay. Now, this obviously takes finance, it takes people. Yeah. Let's talk about that. I know today you've got really key people serve with you on your board. It looks a lot different today than it did back in the beginning.
Yeah, it does.
So how did that happen? What are the steps you took, and what does it look like today in Lancaster? Then we'll talk about other locations.
Yeah. So how it looks today in Lancaster is key people have come along, people who are willing to, as we say, stand at the gate.
Sure.
And we have a leadership team developed after years. It was a long time. We probably had 5 or 6 years that it was just friends or people that knew and would help until it developed into people that realized what the vision was, wanted to be part of it, and started coming alongside of us.
And that's a key leadership concept, because there's only a few people that see the vision in the beginning. You've seen it for a long time. Brian's seen it. A few people around you have seen it. But it takes a while.
And you have to invest in your own vision. So we knew God asked us, are you willing to pay the price?
Right. And you had to pay the price personally.
And we had to pay the price personally.
Exactly.
Personally, physically, financially, we had to pay the price. And I want to say it took its toll, but it really didn't. It grew us. It grew us as leaders. I had a dear friend along the way that she said, everything is training. Yeah. Everything you go through, God is using to teach you and turn you into who he needs you to be. And so when I look at how we did it's funny, you're asking me about leadership, and I'm like, we did everything opposite of what the world says you're to do in leadership, because we followed what God told us to do.
Right.
And so a lot of our stuff doesn't make sense to people. Start a ministry with no money, no building, no board. Like, you don't do that. But yet God was like, if you do this,
well, you paid the price personally. And you simply had to start. You and Brian obeyed God. A few people with you who saw the vision. Now, talk to us about what it looks like today in Lancaster.
So Lancaster today, all of our locations are open 24/7. So we say that as people volunteer to go in, we're open. They would not necessarily be running and functioning 24/7, but they're available for that. So Lancaster has really turned into the hub where there's intercession and worship going on all different times. We serve the community we do a free lunch to the homeless. We found out from the mayor's office, especially during the COVID and pandemic, we became the Sunday lunch facility, and it's been amazing. And we started doing the lunches almost 10 years ago.
And how's that work today? Does that mean you and Brian are there serving lunch every Sunday?
We used to. So, I think what happens is when people start experiencing the vision, it's one thing to tell somebody what you're doing, but when they come and feel it and see it and put their hands to it, they catch the vision then, and they're like, we want to be part of this. So that's what started happening. People would see what we were doing. Can I come and help? Absolutely. So they would come and help. And then the next, can we do a Sunday? Can we take a Sunday? So what happened now is, from us doing one Sunday a month, we have all 4 Sundays, really, if there's a 5th Sunday, we have all the Sundays covered by totally different teams. Brian and I don't necessarily even have to be there on a Sunday morning, because we have all the people taking care of it. So they do a simple church. What happened is that the homeless community and the hungry community came in and were like, but we've had relationship with you for so long, and we want you to teach us more about Jesus. And so I even just talked about that this week with them. Like, this, evangelism looks different for us, because it took years before we even did that.
It's relational evangelism.
It was relational. It was give them a sandwich, sit down and listen to them. And so all of our teams realize that, it's not just Brian and Kim sitting in an office somewhere. Brian and Kim are there cleaning the toilets when they're not there.
Sure.
And so that serving end of leadership never goes away.
Right.
It's constantly there. And that's the one thing you instill in your team is serving, and then we serve the community at the same time.
Now, you mentioned you went against conventional wisdom, and you did things differently than if you read a lot of the books. They tell you to do it. As you look back, are there some things you wish you would have done differently? As you look back and think, God led you. God's grace has been on you guys. There's no question about that. But you look back and say, I think if I were to do it again, I would do a couple things differently. Does that connect with you at all?
I don't know, because my personality, and I'm one of those people that, so the joke in our house is, we wanted to paint the walls, and so I picked a red paint, and Brian said, how did you pick that red paint? And I'm like, well, because I can paint over if I don't like it. So my personality is, if this doesn't work, then we restructure and do something else. So I don't know that I would do anything different, because I think along the way I've learned so many things from mistakes.
Again, it's your journey.
If I never make the mistakes, I would never learn. If everything was perfect, I don't know that I'd be where I am today. Okay.
All right, helpful. So talk about the team. You now have teams, and talk about the other locations. You have 4 locations, right?
Yeah, and that's,
How did that happen?
We don't know. I think the same thing, when we had people that would come serve in Lancaster, and they would be from Ephrata. They're like, you know what? We see Ephrata could really use something like this. And so what we would do is we would go to Ephrata. We would prayer walk. We would talk to the churches. We would talk to leaders. Because we didn't want to ever just be like, we're coming in to take over. Right. We want to make sure we're working with community, working relationally with the pastors. And that's what happened in Ephrata. Like, when we went in, we met with different pastors, said, here's what we're going to do. We just want to be the place where you can come and do some more ministry. We want to partner with other things that are there. And so I think it was like at our 9-year mark is when we started the second location in Ephrata. And so it was a whole team.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
It was a whole team. And now that team, that's one of the mistakes we learned. Unfortunately, none of them that wanted to do Ephrata put time in at Lancaster. Mm-hmm. And so they didn't really have the vision. And so what happened is then more people came along that carried the vision of Ephrata. And Ephrata is just amazing. Like they have stuff every night of the week. They have a team leader there, like a site director there.
So a real key then is for people to work with you, catch the vision, catch the flow of what's going on,
for us,
and not assume that they have the same vision until they walk with you for a season.
Again, going back to that where I said, just because you can play guitar doesn't make you a rock star. There's things you have to learn along the way, and you have to walk with someone, like the disciples walked with Jesus to understand his leadership techniques, and then they modeled them, and so that's what we try to do.
Any business has their own value system.
Yes.
And people need to work with you for a while to find out what that is, because when we walk in unity, God commands blessing, and you can't walk in unity unless you walk together for a while and really have heart-to-heart talks and work together, so you know that hey, we are on the same page with the same value system.
And that's exactly what happened. So that was like what we learned from that. So I would never say, it's like when you said, I would still do it the same way because we learned how not to do it. There has to be unity. They have to understand the vision.
So you're not saying the way you did it was always the best way. It's just that you see that God led you and showed you better ways to do it as you walk through the process.
Yes.
So you're saying it's all right.
It's
God was with us. We're good.
That's right.
Okay. Talk about the third location.
So then from Ephrata, we had a team that was meeting in Lancaster. And they were all saying, hey, we come to Lancaster and that's great, but we all live in Columbia. Do you think we could start something in Columbia? And I said, well, let's pray. So the one girl said, actually, there's a space right underneath my apartment that's for rent. If I talk to the landlord, and I'm like, if you talk to the landlord, the one thing that we have tried to walk out with City Gate is we don't pursue any buildings. What's happened in Ephrata, what happened in...
people come to you, is that what you're saying?
They came to us.
That's good.
Columbia called us. I have this space. I hear what you're doing. I want you here because I hear you're praying about ending drugs. I hear you praying about ending home, and I want you in Columbia doing that.
Yeah. What's so unique about what you guys are doing that I think people often ask me, what's happening with City Gate Ministries? What's going on behind the scenes? I said, really, you guys are creating a space in 4 localities in the greater Lancaster County area for people to come to pray, feed the homeless, be trained. It's just a space that's open and available for any church, any person who loves God. I love the vision. I haven't seen this any other place. That's why I love this vision so much.
And we knew when God birthed this in us in 2005 and 6, and Brian was woken up in the middle of the night. There's stuff that hasn't happened yet.
Right.
We knew this was to be something that could be modeled anywhere because it's not about a denomination. It's about sharing God's love. It's about just what is happening. The body of Christ
working together.
What is happening? Yeah. So what happens in Ephrata is very different than what happens in Lancaster. Right. Columbia is different than both of those.
Yeah.
And so then we had the 3 of them up and running, and seriously, we were praying about one in York, praying about Manheim. God, where do you want us next? Where do you want us next? And I was in Lidditz having lunch, and he said, walk up the street. And I was like, oh, no. I walk up the street. There's a for lease sign. And I'm like, well, that's interesting. And he said, you're going to have that building. And so, again, a whole chain of events where not only did the landlord was praying about someone coming in that would be a good tenant. We were praying about, God, if you want us here, you got to provide the building, the finances, and everything. Right. So I made a post on Facebook that, hey, we're praying about Lidditz. Anyone interested in partnering with that? That'd be great. So 3 days later, a businessman came up and said, I know what you do in all the other locations. I want you in Lidditz. Here's your rent for the whole year.
It's amazing.
And so for us, we're like, we don't want it ever to be, Brian and Kim started a ministry. Brian and Kim rented buildings. Brian and Kim, this is what God has done. And that's, I think, the beauty of letting God be the leader and you submitting to God is he takes care of those details.
Yeah, exactly.
And so that's how all the locations function that way. It's 100% God.
Right. Now you mentioned Brian woke up in the middle of the night. Tell us that story.
So we knew God wanted us to have this ministry. And again, I was thinking it had everything to do with worship and a stage. That's just because that was my training. But God kind of retrained me in some things with that. Brian woke up in the middle of the night with the word, it's the city gate. And so we've known about the gates of the city from the Bible times, but we felt like from that moment on, God was saying the gate is where the prophets sat. It's where the finance happened. Right. It's where, and so when we look at all of our locations, they're all in districts in the cities where finances are right next door. Like in Lancaster, we're between the mayor's office and the hospital. Like we're always plugged into these places exactly what would happen in Jerusalem at the city gate. Mm-hmm. And so it blows our mind, but it's like, of course. So that's how we got the name City Gate. It was God gave it to us directly in a dream. Beautiful. And kind of spoke into what that was going to look like then. So
you look back to 2005 when you really started and the vision you had. It's changed quite a bit.
Oh, drastically.
So that's another key concept. You get this thing in your heart from the Lord. And you begin, you just start, you get a few people that just join with you and you find who those people are and you start and then you allow God to show you and mold you and lead you. And what happens down the road will look different perhaps.
Absolutely.
It's to some degree to that what you originally had imagined in your head. Am I right?
Exactly. Kind of like what you said. And so we knew City Gate has visions and values. Like we have have all the things we needed for the 501c3. We have all that written down. But how we walk those out in each location is just a little different because we wanted it to be fluid. And we knew that what happens in Lancaster is very different than Ephrata. Right. Lancaster was homeless, a lot of homeless. Ephrata had a lot of drug stuff we were dealing with. Right. Columbia had more rejection things we were dealing with. Mm-hmm. Lidditz has become a business prayer hub. Wow. There's so many people meeting there for prayer for business before they started. It's amazing. Businessmen coming in and setting up times, bringing in other businessmen to pray for the business. Beautiful. So my heart now, like what I feel God is saying is every zip code. Wow. Because every zip code has a different sound, it has a different need, it has a different, and so it's not one size fits all. It's what is that community need. Yeah. And so now we've kind of realizing that we feel God wants us to be in communities to help with the needs of that community. Mm-hmm.
We're going to keep watching, seeing the new community and see where God takes you next.
It's exciting.
So what would you say to a younger leader who would ask you for advice on how to be a healthy leader?
Yeah.
What would you say to someone who would ask you that?
Yeah, so healthy leaders create healthy leaders. And so when Brian and I were starting, and so for me, because Brian was working full-time, I followed people that I saw health in. Sure. And okay, that's good. That's very good. Yeah.
So you want to learn from healthy leaders?
I want to learn from healthy, where I saw what was happening. So back in that time, like we were very connected with Eagle's Wings and Robert Stearns from Buffalo, New York. We loved them. We saw how they operated as a team. Sure. And we were like, that's how we want our team to operate, in community, in friendship, preferring one another. So we went up and spent time with them. Sure. We got involved with Dove, and we saw how Dove is very big on fathering and mothering and servant. And we're like, okay, we're spending time with you so that we learn how to be better servants.
Okay. So spend time with people who carry something that you want to carry. Yes. That is really, really good.
And that's for everything. Like if you want to, if moving prophetically, you spend time with someone who's prophetic. Yeah.
So what are key issues you find leaders facing today?
Oh, don't get me started. I get myself in trouble. So I feel like today, because of, and I'm not the only one saying this, but because of the social media that we have, because of the influence you can have on social media, everybody's trying to be a star. Right. And you know what? If you don't have character to back that up, you're really just a pair of sneakers. Yeah. So, you can have a really expensive pair of sneakers on the stage, but your personal life is horrible. Right. And so, again, almost going back to my first thing, young leaders, where are you serving? Yeah. What is your heart? Like, are you willing to come? And that's happened. People have come to us, and I said, well, okay, can you come and help with this? No, I can't. I'm too busy for that. Yeah. Like, I can't sweep that. I can't go clean City Gate. Okay, well, then, I'm sorry. You're not going to be a good leader. Right.
Good. You're a writer. You're an author. You've written some books. Yeah.
Kind of. Not like you. You need 500 books.
Not quite. Not near. Talk to us about, your books. And you've got a few books on Amazon. Talk to us about that. Yeah, I do.
So from the position of leadership, like I'm a teacher by nature. I love sharing the Word of God. And God had given me, is it an acronym or acrostic? I forget, where like the word pray. Acronym, and he showed me how to take that word pray and put it for every book of the Bible. Cool. And use a Bible study. And so my favorite is Song of Solomon. So I wrote a book. I started a ministry called One Day Legacy, wrote this little Bible study book on taking the word pray. And so P would be, where do you see the prayer in this chapter?
Right.
R, the relationship. Where's the relationship between you and God? A, the attribute. What attribute of God or what attribute of Jesus? And then Y, where is your yes? Where's the yes that I need to do this? And so going through the whole Bible and writing more of those, they're coming out. So that's just a small little Bible study book, but I'm telling you, it's powerful. It has changed how I read the Bible, because everything's a prayer in the Bible. Everything becomes relational. And then I did, from my love from that, and as we talked, in the house church movement, discipleship making movement, using a discovery Bible method for kids, I started thinking, this was one time at one of the leadership conferences we had, and I'm sitting there thinking, I'm spending so much money as a house church on like curriculum for Sunday school, and we don't use half of it because you only have 4 or 5 kids, and it was hundreds of dollars a month to keep up with everything. And God's like, why don't you just use the Bible? So I wrote, it's called Disciple Kidship. And it's the same premise. I love it. I use it for adults too. I use it for anyone. So basically God showed me how to take Bible stories in 6 squares, use the Discovery Bible method with it. So after you tell the story using the 6 squares, you ask the children, where do you see God in this? And then, the last command, who are you going to share this with?
Right.
And so it's just a small little book that can go anywhere. And I've had people that are from Africa and other places that have bought it because you don't need anything. You can write in the dirt, you can write on a piece of paper, or your famous whiteboards.
I love whiteboards.
Yeah. And then from a place of prayer, teaching on prayer and being in the prayer movement, God showed me how to take 5 circles and how to pray for anyone. And that I'm a prayer life as a leader. So I pray for my family, my immediate family. And I could go down through these 5 circles and I write their names in it. It's just a way to keep your prayers organized. And it's a 100-day journal to do that with. Right.
I know you do training and teaching in the body of Christ. You do seminars and on prayer and other areas of concerning ours. I know I want to have you and Brian back in the future. We talk about microchurch and house church because you guys have been really that's your passion. You've done that so well, and we'll have you back in the future. Is there anything else today before we close today? Anything else today that you'd want to share with a younger leader? Think here's one thing you need to be aware. Here's something I learned that could really help you in the future. A nugget of truth. Anything else you could think of?
Yeah, I mean the only thing, like looking back over what I did and like what I just value is I'm always looking and looking. Yeah. And so even growing in leadership, you're looking around. Like we watched you in Laverne. Mm-hmm. How do they talk to people? So it's not so much, you might have the qualities of a leader, but you have to have the character and you have to have the community around you to help grow you as a leader. And so again, too often young leaders want to be the one on the stage. It's all about them, but yet you have to learn how to work together with people, submitting to each other. Mm-hmm. Asking the tough questions sometimes. Like I remember saying, like, did I say that right? How could I say that better? Like always asking. So for me, it's a constant learning and growing. You never arrive as a leader.
That is so true.
You never arrive. You're always learning. And so keep learning. Surround yourself with people that you want to, examples that you see in their life, and surround yourself. Ask them the tough questions.
Now you have a podcast. Talk to us about your podcast.
I do. Yeah, it's just where
Coffee
I can
with
chit-chat.
Kim, huh?
Coffee with Kim, where I share my love of coffee and God. So, I started it. Actually, my daughters had asked me to start it because some of their friends, maybe not going to church, and just want some nuggets of truth.
Sure.
Want questions answered. And so I kind of started this for that reason. I do maybe 10 minutes, 15 minutes. Right now we're going through Proverbs. I use the One Day Legacy format where we take books of the Bible or verses. In July we went through fire and studied fire in the Bible. And then what I do in the podcast is I'll take that day's reading and just talk that scripture out. How do you pray that scripture? Give stories. Yeah. It's been fun. Awesome. It's really been fun.
Great. Kim, it's been so good having you with me today. And, anybody would like to know more about Kim and Brian and all they're doing, again, it's Citygate House of Prayer.
CityGateLancaster.com.
Okay, there you go.
The
CityGateLancaster.com is your website. Again, we got the show notes with your books and everything, and you just check out all the show notes on that. And we're going to have you back, and again, along with Brian in the future. Yeah, we're going to talk about microchurch and all you've learned on that in the last.
You're going to need more time.
We will. We really will. But I thought we want to do that in the future. Get you both together, and we'll talk about it in the future.
That'd be great.
So thank you, everyone, for joining us today for the Larry Kreider Leadership Podcast, as we've learned much more about leadership, about Citygate House of Prayer, and all that God's done through Kim and Brian and their whole team. And look forward to having you back. Again, check the show notes. You've got a lot more information on there for you, a lot of things that Kim has learned, a lot of things that would help you as a leader now and in the future. Look forward to having you back soon. God bless you. And again, thank you for joining us today for the Larry Kreider Leadership Podcast.
Thank you for listening to Larry Kreider's Leadership Podcast. If you want more information about any of Larry's books, daily devotionals, small group resources, or any other teachings, go to LarryKreider.com.